Hi, everyone. I'm Raul, and joining me, of course, my co-host Daisy. Welcome to Failing with Style podcast. Today is going to be a unique episode. We're going to have our first real guest that we've ever had. This is a very exciting moment for us.
I'm so honored. This is first. Wow, I'm glad you guys didn't tell me. Okay,
first. And this gentleman, he's done storyboard work. He's a writer. He's a puppeteer, which I would love to dive into. Mr. Erik Kuska, thank you for joining us, sir.
The pleasure is mine. I'm so honored to be here on my first podcast with two pros.
You said pro, but I realized right when I said your last name, I'm like, oh my God, did I say Eric's last name right?
It was great. Yes.
Awesome.
We were fun. Off to a good start.
Thank you for joining us. I know you're a incredibly busy man, and I really appreciate you making time for us and me and Daisy to talk to you. I think Daisy, you want to pose the question you want to ask? Or?
Yeah. So how this usually works on our Failing with Style podcast, and just to say, like, Failing with Style is foolproof for us because we can mess up, so it takes a lot of the pressure off. But I do want to ask the question because what we're trying to do from the guests on the show is kind of learn from them. Because Erik, I know that you have a crazy resume, crazy awesome resume. So we wanted to ask you today how one of your failures has turned into a life lesson for you and how you've grown from it. So if you want to take over and tell us what's up.
It's a deep question when you're faced with it, when you have to try it on and kind of go like, wow, what was that moment that changed everything? And mine's really kind of small. It's one of those events from, and nobody, I mean, there's billions of events that change us, but I think I was 14. I grew up in northern Idaho, a real rural town. And every day I would take the school bus home, to get, we lived out in the country. So on gravel road, it was about an hour drive by school bus to get to my house.
May I ask, when you mean northern Idaho, are you talking about the little peninsula portion of Idaho? Wow.
That's right.
I've never been to them. That's awesome. That's crazy.
There's not many of us out there. Yeah, so I'm way up there. It's rural. I mean, there's not a lot going on. But, my life is you get up, you feed the chickens, you feed the dogs, the horses or whatever, get ready for school, go down to the gravel driveway and take the bus to school. So I'm in junior high, and this is my life, pretty basic. We just got cable TV. This is probably 84, right? 85.
Wow, yeah.
So there was this lady, I don't know if your listeners will know her, but her name was Madonna. And
I don't know who that is. I'm just kidding.
We had this thing called MTV, right? And so, Michael Jackson, Madonna, it was just going off. Huey Lewis in the News, the trifecta. And Madonna was just, I'm 14, and there's something about her that I really pay attention when Madonna is on the television.
Yeah, she has like the stage presence.
I don't know what.
Yeah.
It was her voice. But so I'm going to school, and my other friends in 8th grade, I think, were also into Madonna. We're like, yeah, man, she's pretty cool. Hey, you know what I heard? I was like, no. There was a rumor going around that Madonna, who is known as being kind of risque, because I'm growing up in Northern Idaho. This is pretty plain, not a lot of frills. Like if some cow gets out of a pasture, that was news. So I don't know. this friend of mine must have had intel. He had a cousin in New York or something, but he said that I heard a rumor that Madonna likes to drive around in her limo in New York, and she likes to pick up Puerto Rican boys that walk alone on the sidewalk.
Okay.
What a rumor.
I'm waiting. The trajectory of this has got me enthralled. So let's talk.
My life changed. So you're left with that information at lunchtime. You know, the bell rings. You got to go to math class now. And I was sitting there and I was like, well, I really want to meet Madonna. So school was over and my friends and I were lining up for the school bus. And they said, hey, man, you know, the bus came on and they were getting on. And they're like, aren't you going to get on? And I'm like, no, I'm going to walk. They're like, are you feeling okay, man? Are you serious? And I'm like, no, I'm going to walk this one. You guys go on without me. So they took off. So that afternoon, I walked around Moscow, Idaho with my backpack on, just looking over my shoulder for like a limo. I assumed it was a white limo. Now, and I just walked all evening until it was like 7:00. It's dark at night. I'm walking all around this small town of Moscow. I didn't see any limos. There was a tractor, you know, a couple dogs barked at me, horse trailer. But no Madonna. And I was really bummed out, but I believed in myself that this was going to happen. You know, those moments where you just feel the universe is aligned with your intentions and good thing is going to happen. So this gets buried away until now. This is the first time I'm revealing this. I never met Madonna. Never came close or anything. But the goofy thing is just you get older and you make a lot of weird decisions in your life. And I've noticed that I'm really good at bad math.
Okay.
And that is my learning lesson is I started looking at, you know, posing that question that you guys have posed is, you know, what are the mistakes you've made? What are the assumptions you've thought? I've noticed a lot of times I try to find a shortcut to get somewhere. And so this was one of them. And it was just, it's to me, that was normal. I did this a lot. I just assumed Madonna was driving around. Yeah, you could poke holes in my story. You're not Puerto Rican, Eric. You're not.
Yeah, you're not in New York, right?
You're not in New York. Your Wranglers and your denim shirt probably isn't going to really be a catch. I've also thought about like what would have happened had she pulled over and said, "Hey." That's a whole nother fantasy podcast. But
oh man.
But just the point is sometimes I think things. I think to the goal. I have the idea. I'm like, oh, I'm going to play for the Chicago Cubs. I'm going to work for Disney. And I really get ahead of myself, and that's fine. I was embarrassed by some of these assumptions you'd make because, you know, you'd show up at a college baseball tryout going like, yeah, I'd like to play baseball for the Cubs. And this guy who was running the tryouts at my university, the first thing we did is ran sprints, and he's like, you in the back, me. He's like, okay, you're done. And it's just like, yeah, I was slow, and your dream of playing for the Cubs is over. And the point is it's I just assumed that I could do these things. I assumed that because I could do Walt Disney's signature really well, because that's what I practiced, because I was pretty sure that if I had a good Walt Disney signature, Disney would say like, oh, this kid's got something. Let's hire him. And I think I'm good. Like, And then you
I
find
just,
out, yeah.
I'm sorry. I just love the idea that you went to a tryout and you're like, one professional baseball shortstop, please. Like you're ordering your career. I love it.
Well,
I
I
was so
wanted to.
confident. I took a wooden bat to the tryout because I thought I want to show them I can hit with the wooden bat, and they'll be like, "Oh, this kid, he's even ready sooner than we expected. He's that good." Um,
Eric, I wanted to mention like this. It seems to be like you have this common thread, right? Like that you see this big goal, and it's kind of like, I'm going to get, like, let's just say, I'm going to get that red cup. I'm going to get the red cup, and the red cup is what it is. But, like, based on your resume, it doesn't take you to the red cup, it takes you to the green cup, right? I mean, is that kind of what you're saying? Like, every time that you have this thought in your head of, like, I'm going to make it, it's not exactly what it panned out to be, right?
yeah, I think I that's a great way of summing it up. I'm 52 now, and now I can, you know, you've mentioned earlier, sometimes your elders actually know what they're talking about. And I've
Yeah.
fought against that wisdom, um, going like, I'm not going to listen to these people. I've got it up here. I'm going to just work on Walt Disney's signature. The bottom line is I did end up getting to work for Disney, but it took 25 years of drawing and life drawing and not getting hired and getting fired from jobs that I was hired for, and they just saw my drawings and they're like, "Oh my god, how did you get in here? You're no." It's tough. You really got to crash and burn a lot, and maybe you want that red cup. That's fine. But you're not ready for the red cup. You're ready for the wooden spoon. You're not even at cup level.
So, may I ask, like,
Yeah.
I mean, we describe this as a failure sometimes, but I think it's a beautiful sign of visualization, a common practice that actually professional athletes do this. A lot of professional athletes, famously basketball players, they visualize making like long range shots or dunking and stuff like that before they actually create the activity, before they actually make the play.
Yeah.
So while it did 25 years of hard work and dedication, but you've always had that visualization in your mind of the end of the goal in this aspect, like working for Disney or being the artist that you are now. Like I think it's a really beautiful roundabout way of having like amazing
Yeah.
visualization.
Visualization.
No, it totally is. I think it's a great observation. If you don't even fantasize about it or visualize, it's even harder for the universe, if we're going to go cosmic, to
I'm into
to
cosmic.
to support you. And basically, you've not only got to put it out in yourself what you want to do, but you also have to tell your peer group and your friends and your family or social media, and you have to start putting it out there, because that pressure is going to start pushing you towards that next level or that next I don't know, into that cocoon to turn into
Yeah.
that next phase of your life. As you know, I think you both are not working in nursing anymore, and maybe there was something there that manifested you to go into this next chapter. It's
Definitely.
it we need to always be changing. I think that's important because, I mean, not saying we're snakes or whatever, but we outgrow our skins,
Yes.
and everyone just kind of contains us to, well, this is what you do, and you're like, no, I want to do something else. I want to, and it's just sad. Like, you talk to a lot of older generations, and maybe they didn't feel like they had that liberty to explore because they were busy trying to support us as their kids or their cousins
Yeah.
or their family.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wanted to, my gosh, because I think it's been, your career sounds so beautiful to me because it's been, you're a writer, puppeteer, that you've been a director. I wanted to ask you when you were going through all these, because to me it feels like, yeah, you're like a jack of all trades, right?
Hmm.
Was it that you found yourself in those positions, or were they goalposts that you set out for yourself? Like, I'm a writer, I've been a writer for 10 years, now I want to switch to director, right?
I think the goal of working, say, for Disney is you get seduced by the red cup, the if we're going to
Mm-hmm.
call it that, the finish line. But then you get hired. Say you do get into a big company or a big position. You don't start at the top. They don't ask you to give them ideas. You're entry level, and probably the same thing with stand up, or with what you're doing, Daisy, trying to get into animation and that industry is you've got this freedom of being on the outside right now, but once you get into the machine, you start all the way at the bottom.
Mm-hmm.
And then you start realizing, like, oh, I work at Disney or I work at these shows, but they don't scratch the itch of me creating my own stuff. So I want to do what they do. They're writers. Writers create stories. I want to start taking writing classes. I want to start, and animation, it takes 6 months to see what you're working on to finally be finished with sound and color and all this stuff. So I want to see it now. So I started doing puppetry or improv, because then you get immediate feedback from your audience. Like,
Yeah.
okay, this is the craving that I've had, is I want real-time feedback from people.
Yes.
That's a
And,
crazy man. I've never thought of that aspect of working, like, for example, on a film, on a movie, on a show, or any animation, that you're the audience response, you're not getting it until months maybe after the
yeah.
final product is created. Man, that, and the idea of, like, yeah, like puppeteering and improv, like me doing as a live performer, like, I get that. Man, I feel spoiled now. I feel spoiled now.
Yeah,
It's
I want to
It's
crazy.
speak to that because, like, for me, when I'm going through my art stuff, so okay, Eric, recently we went to one of Raul's shows,
hmm,
and he got immediate feedback, and we've talked about it, but for me, I'm like, I kind of got a little like jealous because I was like, I'm drawing all this stuff that I've been working on for 2, 3 years now, and nobody's telling me anything. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
the most I get is like, oh, that's so cool, babe, from my husband, and then like, but. And it's funny you say that because I'm getting that itch, right? Like, okay, I
hmm,
want that immediate feedback. So, like, Toastmasters for me, which I've spoken to you
yeah.
guys about, yeah, is like the immediate feedback that I get. I get the claps. And I get like now I'm even thinking of joining improv because I'm like then I could see immediately if this my storytelling work is working, right?
Right.
Um but yeah, I love that. I think is that the reason why you went into puppeteering? Like is that were
Yeah, I
you
think.
drawing and you're like, I need to be a puppeteer?
Well, I think now that I can look back at some things, animation, I love to draw. I love to spend hours on end locked into this moment of dragging a pencil across a piece of paper. I could, I think it's part of where I grew up. Being out in the woods, you're alone. There's some animals there, but you got to entertain yourself. And drawing was something that really pacified me. And it still is. Like, I won't even sleep. It's just, I get lost in that process. And then after a while, I found out I like writing. Writing is spending a long time by yourself and your thoughts, being a perfectionist. And then you start doing puppetry. And then I start realizing, like, wow, there's a lot of control here. An artist
Yeah.
is controlling every expression, every pencil line. A writer, every word. A puppeteer, you are literally pulling those strings. And that's why I got into improv, because I just knew that is severing all that control. And I have a real difficult time with improv because it goes against what is my, you know, issues is I've got to give control to somebody else. And
Yeah.
it's really difficult, but then you begin realizing, wow, collaborating with other people is such a better way to generate more interesting material
There's new
and
ideas.
yeah. And you just begin to realize, like, oh, maybe listening to this voice in my head is not maybe this voice is not to be trusted. Maybe it's a faulty narrator. I mean, only
I,
because we're skewed. We have our perspective, and then we start hearing other people's ideas, and you're got like, oh, that's brilliant. I love that.
the,
you Oh,
there's
go
a
ahead,
practice
Raul.
in stand up, is known as the economy of words. I don't know if this works for writers as well. Um, the reason why I bring this up is because in my mind, I feel like I need to have so much fleshed out of a premise before I
Right.
can get to the punchline, right?
Yeah.
But doing my act in front of other comedians, doing it in front of other people, and getting their feedback, like, hey, you can cut some of this out, or how about we shorten this part, or do you really need this tag, this other comedic portion in the act, because it takes away from the punchline. So it's a practice, much like how you're talking about, like we think we not saying that we form a bubble in our own minds, but we think that we have to do so much more work than it was actually needed for the final product to hit.
Absolutely. Comics are the best because they just. I've taken writing classes, and they'll they'll record like a John Mulaney bit, and then they'll go through and they'll just say, like, listen to every line of this setup. It's all giving you detail, some piece of information. It keeps building. My stories, uh, though, in my head they work, they kill just as great as the best comic. Um, they're clunky, they're confusing for the audience, they're too much material to throw at somebody, and you just have to learn that as a writer or as an artist. We put in too many lines in our drawings, we put in too many words into our paragraphs, um, and we just need to present it to other people, get that feedback, and then be humble enough to go, like, this is a two-way relationship. My ideas and the audience that I'm trying to express them to. If you go to that next level of, I want to present stuff to other people, collaborating and listening to other people is a big part of that process. It's just, unfortunately, we don't think of that sometimes. We just think, and we just listen to this voice rather than
Yeah,
the other people.
what draws me in about this career change, and like, it's I'm used to working in a team, and working in a team and nursing is very much like, I know what I'm going to do, but if somebody else needs help, I'm going to be there for them, right? And then when I'm transitioning into this career, it's almost astounding how, first, you know how your craft works and you know what you want to portray, but at the same time you have to understand your audience. And it's like, who is your audience?
Yeah.
Is it a global? And then if like you want to make it into a global scale, it's almost as though, how am I supposed to reach that global audience? Like, I'm this one person from Idaho, right? Or like, I'm this one person from Miami who knows only that culture. How do I make it into that global scale? Um, and yeah, actually, I want to give this little platform to Raul because um, I you're going through that right now. I feel like that, uh, figuring out your audience and trying to understand what comedy lines are going to hit, right? Do you want to talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit?
Yeah. I have been performing comedy. I've been doing stand up for about 4 years now. I haven't now. The one aspect I will say, and probably something I've hindered myself in, is that I've done it mostly locally. I've done it mostly in the South Florida area. I've also done North Florida and stuff like that, but it's mostly been in Florida in general. I performed one time in North Carolina and one time in California. This actually is recent time I went to see Daisy, and they saw me. It was the first time I ever performed in another state outside of those three states, which was Colorado, excuse me. And every audience is definitely unique, and every audience is definitely different. And maybe my act currently is too fine tuned to a certain demographic, and it's something I'm working on. It's something I'm definitely working on and trying to hone in on.
Yeah, I wanted to hear Eric's perspective on that because I know you've written for global audiences, I would say. Like, I just think of Bugs Bunny and he's a global character.
Right.
So, how is that a challenge or is that something that you figure out with your team? Like, how does that work?
The feedback you get is so helpful. A lot of television, at least in animation now, it's pre-decided like what age group you're going for. So even though the Bugs Bunny I grew up with was maybe all ages, the show that I worked on for Bugs Bunny was Y7, which means 7 and under. And so that rules out a lot of innuendo. And there's a lot of rules that are attached to that as well. Is you can't show any impacts. So a lot of times when you watch a Y7 show, if somebody gets hit in the head,
It
there'll
has
be
to
a
be off
flash.
screen.
It'll be off screen or a flash screen.
Oh my god!
The legal logic, I guess, is that you will never see the impact, so it can't be repeated by an audience member, which is kind of tricky because you have to come up with some material these days is different. Is you even though it's kind of tropey, you wouldn't want to just pull somebody with a sledgehammer and smash somebody over the head. But now that wouldn't be allowed, not only because
Right.
it's violent, but also it can be imitated or repeated by an audience member. So that long answer is I had help and I had some really strict kind of guide rails on what could or couldn't exist in this bandwidth of Bugs Bunny. Um,
Because
and
not only just age, it's also like the scope of time that you're also working on this project. Because different legal policies are in place, different styles of culture are now in place that don't apply. 1960s Bugs Bunny is not going to be 2000s Bug Bunny or 2020s Bug Bunny.
yeah, another thing they encourage you is no signage, no, because that has to be translated. So if you're doing a lot of pun humor or word jokes and stuff like that, maybe it works in English, but this Bugs Bunny is going to be international. So quickly in the script stage, they would say, "Hey, these jokes here, um, we probably don't want to go with because it's just not going to translate." But man, we had some good ones.
They're just like the barrier to entry for you is so ridiculously high in that area. I never even considered all these aspects of a cartoon. Like the barrier to entry not only does it have to be relatable to almost every demographic and every age. I mean, this age group, which also means it's going to probably be relatable to almost all ages, but also to make it funny or to make it even a cartoon in any aspect is it that is bonkers, to be putting it lightly.
it it sounds intimidating, and it is at first, and it's frustrating when your script comes noted up and it says can't do this. This isn't going to play. This is out of the age group. But honestly, my experience is that those restrictions actually are really helpful. And for anybody that's out there working on or thinking about a creative idea, give yourself restrictions. If you're trying to write a joke, make it 3 sentences. That's it. Or keep yourself on, like, give me a 15-second, setup and punchline. If it's a cartoon, let's just have one character wanting to do one thing and have an obstacle for that character. And how are they going to solve it? Keep it simple. And you can just there's writing books that kind of do this for movie scripts. Start up with our connecting character and give them a dilemma, give them a want, you can really get lost in all that. But the bottom line is so I know starting with a blank piece of paper, you can do anything, is really difficult. You guys make it really easy because we're talking about failures. And you know what? I can talk about that. And
I agree. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I was going to say, all of your listeners can nod their head and be like, oh, man, I could be a guest on this podcast. And they should be.
Yeah.
Let's hear them. I throw this out to everyone, even though this is not my podcast. But if you're a failure, they want to hear from you.
To go back to your point, I really agree on like putting barriers. So I do perform shows entirely clean. I perform entirely clean shows.
Great.
And what that has taught me is to use different aspects of a joke and like to help create what was called tags. It's trying to make funny, humorous moments in a joke. And like I totally agree, because it's the best part, when those barriers, when you pull them away from yourself, how much more expansive and how much better you are as a professional in doing whatever aspect creatively. But you have now this plethora of avenues. When you thought you just had this one strong avenue, you now have these multitude of different aspects and options you can approach, because you've already worked on this finite barrier you've given yourself and you've maximized your potential in there. That once you remove them, it's like opening up the floodgates for yourself. I'm not saying that to be vulgar, but like that you can approach comedy, or you can approach art in a variety of ways now. I don't know if I made myself point clear.
Absolutely. I just, at Lightbox, where Daisy attended earlier, attended a lecture, and this guy, John Navarez, he just said, 5 panels. Tell me a 5-panel story. That's it. And a lot of times as a storyboard artist, you go to town, you go crazy with generating all this stuff. And he just take out 5 note cards. Here's the beginning. Here's the inciting incident. Here's the middle, where they're preparing. Here's the climax, and here's the resolution. 5 cards. And it's really difficult to be so restrictive to your material, but like you said, you're keeping it simple for your audience. You're keeping it contained for you. This is a puzzle. You can figure it out. If you make your little tasks small and bite-sized, we can chew on them. But I would imagine if Daisy, you say, like, I have to do all 50 life drawings tonight, or Raul, I got to get my hour in. You start with one joke. You start with a bit. You start with 5 minutes. You slowly cobble it together. And I want to.
Yeah, that's great advice, Eric. Thank you. Because it's almost as though the goals seem so big. Like, I have the biggest goals that I've ever had doing this career transition. I'm like, I'm going to be a director. I'm going to own a studio. I'm going to be a story artist. And then, like, you get back to ground zero and you're like, but where do I start? Like, how do I even do this? And like you said, like, sometimes that weighs on us so much because all you do, it's more about doing rather than talking. And I figured that out doing this career transition, because sometimes I get in my head so much about what my big goal is that I forget it's the little things that are going to get me there. So I think we should wrap this up. But say your last words, Eric. I want to hear them.
Well, just I've spent a lot of time trying to visualize it, because I try to teach students, and I think we're dealing with some tough stuff. We've got this voice in our head, and it's narrating things to us that may not be true. And I just want to put that out there to people, like, believe in yourself and have confidence, but also share your work with others, and also have the grace to be where you're at. You're not going to be second base for the Chicago Cubs.
Right.
Eric.
Full circle.
Okay. You're not going to meet Madonna by walking home from school. But you know, I think climbing a mountain is one foot after another, one step at a time. And I think a lot of times we just look at that peak and we're like, oh, but that person climbed the mountain and this person's climbed the mountain and they're already climbed 3 mountains. And it's like, good for them. Take what you can, you know, if you want to climb that mountain, talk to that person on how they climb that mountain, and they might point out a way to do it. But you got to just give yourself the grace of just like, I'm going to crawl one little step today. That's it. I'm just going to do one little, you know, I'm going to do one push-up. I'm going to write one joke. I'm going to do one life drawing. Start there. Start with one, and it'll add up, and you'll get better.
Lovely, Eric. Thank you.
And you'll fail a lot. Trust me. But that's the point.
That's the point. That's why we have this podcast. We can
that's
have
the biggest point. You are supposed to fail. That is how you evolve. That's how you learn. That's how you grow. You need to fail. Everyone wants to be perfect. And all I know is everything I've done, it's because I've failed. So
it's
keep
like you
failing.
need to walk and not take the bus so you can realize that Madonna's not around. I know.
I'm holding out hope. I'm holding out hope for Eric. That
Madonna, I know you're listening.
Yeah. Yeah, let's hold on to that hope.
I moved on from Madonna and the Cubs, but hey, and I'm always a student. I'm going to learn. And look, I never thought I'd be on a podcast, and today it happened.
Woo!
Woo! Oh my gosh. Thank you guys. You've been wonderful.
Thank you, Eric. Honestly, this has been a pleasure. Eric has been my mentor for a year, and I'm just so honored that he's on this podcast today, because it really feels like, you know, we have these little listeners, and they're big listeners to us, but you know, on the grand scheme of things, we wanna get big, and having you on the show, Eric, it just feels like a big thing for me. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for, when I was mentoring you with 100 other online students, you always asked really strategic, inquisitive questions. And you stood out because you were interested, you were engaged, and you wanted to know how does this work? How can I do that? And here we are. And now you're at Lightbox and you're meeting artists, and I think you met Pumbaa's
the Pumbaa guy.
Yeah.
Pumbaa guy. Big things. Big things.
Eric, let me tell you, if you think that Daisy is inquisitive and asks questions, wait till you hear her spouse try to order coffee. Oh, sorry, I was like an inside joke. Eric, you've been a delight to have on. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks, Raul.
Where can the nice people find you?
If you want to see my puppetry or storyboards or whatever, you can find it at erikkuska.com. My first name, last name, and the Insta's Kuska.
Kuska.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Nice.
And where can the nice people find you, Raul?
Funny Raul on all social media. And I have shows coming up very soon at the end of December, which will be fun. And we got a whole lot of things coming up for January.
Yes.
Very exciting stuff.
And I'm at Daisy Visiana. We're also at Failing with Style Pod on Instagram. I'm also on LinkedIn as Daisy Visiana, so hire me if you want someone cool. that will always be my plug until I get hired.
Hire me if you want someone cool.
I swear.
Yeah. All right, guys. We'll see you next time.
Keep failing.
Yes. Yes.